Welcome to the Invested Dads Podcast, simplifying financial topics so that you can take action and make your financial situation better. Helping you to understand the current world of financial planning and investments, here are your hosts, Josh Robb and Austin Wilson.
All right. Hey, welcome back to the Invested Dads Podcast, a podcast where we take you on a journey to better your financial future. Today, we are going to be talking about a continuation of the series, Monetary Moments with Josh and Austin. And today, we are going to be talking about the next phase of life following the 20s and 30s, then the 40s and 50s. 2 episodes prior. Yep. This is all about, we're honing in on the decade of your 60s today. Yes. So we're talking about that, and that's a big transition decade for a lot of people.
Yep. So we're talking about the 60s. Let's get out our bell bottoms and some disco music.
The disco was not in the 60s.
I don't know. I wasn't alive in the 60s.
That was in the 70s.
Yeah, whatever.
Come on, man.
I don't know.
So, the 60s. So it's kind of funny. All of those clothing trends, though.
Yeah, they're coming back around.
Well, no, it was like the 60s clothes were like a thing when I was in like high school. And then the 70s thing kind of came through. The 80s and 90s thing's back now.
Big
hair, like the big baggy parachute pants, and it's scrunchies.
Wait till the 90s show up.
That's my jam.
Wow.
Give me some of that. It's a little bit like those big jeans.
Oh yeah,
the straight huge baggy jeans. Like a belt wallet or a wallet thing with the chain.
You need the chain.
It's coming.
No one steals it.
Yep. You watch out, Josh. It's coming back.
I hope not.
So no, not the 1960s, but we are talking about specifically ages 60 to 69 and what financial issues are most important.
Sweet.
So as normal, we like to start with numbers. Because I like numbers. I'm a numbers guy. You know that, Josh.
I do know.
So let's start with some statistics. And this is from 2019 in Fidelity. The average balance in your 50s, so this is recap of where we're coming out of and going into. Average balance in your 401k in your 50s is $174,000. So we talked about that last week. Average balance, flash forward to the next decade, in your 60s isn't that much more. No. It's actually only $182,000.
Yep.
And that contribution rate moves from 10.1% in your 50s to 11% in your 60s. Again, not a big increase. Yep. Those numbers are shockingly low.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute and why that is.
Yep.
But the other thing you gave us is kind of a reference point to how much someone should have saved as a percent of their salary.
Right.
And we talked about the 60s because that's the ending point last one, kind of what your target to end is.
Right. So we started with where we ended the last episode saying that your goal should be roughly 8 times your salary
when you hit 60.
Yep. So then full retirement age, about 67, right? That should then be about 10 times. And I think you mentioned that last episode too. Yeah. So looking at it in multiples of your salary, like we've always said, is a little bit easier to look at there. So if you make, when you're in your 60s or whatever, $50,000 a year in salary, you should have $500,000 saved, dedicated for retirement. And that's not just in your 401k. These numbers that we just talked about, this is just 401k, but that's in all of your retirement accounts put together.
Yep. And the reason for that, again, and this all comes from Fidelity, is their concept is they had some assumptions in there, but they assumed you're going to then only spend 80% of what you were making, and they were looking at that sustainable withdrawal rate, saying that 10 times your salary at that point would be sustainable to take withdrawal out if you were living on 80% of what that salary was. So that's kind of what their underlying basis were.
Absolutely. So like we had just kind of talked about, that's not a big change year over year. So we're talking $8,000, but we're talking 2 times your salary over really almost a decade or so. Yep. So why is that not such a big change, Josh?
And the best way of seeing that is the Gallup poll in 2018. That's the most recent one I could find. But they did a survey, and they had this results, and they surveyed a bunch of people and said, okay, what are your plans for retirement? What age are you planning on retiring? The average age people were planning on retiring was 66, which it's the average, so there's some up and downs in there, but the full retirement age has slowly been working up. It's to 67 for Social Security. Right. We'll talk about what that is in a minute, but it's started early on. It was, 62 was the original one, but it's worked its way up, and over time they've been increasing that full retirement age number, and so this average has been trying to track along right slightly behind that. But what's interesting about this poll is when they actually surveyed the retired people and asked them, when did you retire? The survey found that the actual retirement age was 61.
So that's really about 5 years. People are actually retiring about 5 years before they think they're going to retire, is what you're saying.
Yep. And there was multiple reasons for that. One, the positive end is your investments did better, your savings did better, so you could retire sooner than you had originally thought.
Yeah.
Great. That's awesome. The other side is that there was some unknown event. Maybe it was a health issue. Maybe there was a family issue. Maybe you got laid off. Maybe there was a downturn in the economy. Something that forced you to retire sooner than you wanted to.
Or alternatively, maybe people retired before they should have.
Yes. Yep.
So if they're not working with someone who's helping them kind of along the process, maybe they're just like, yeah, I have $500,000. That's good enough, right? But they don't really think about the impact.
So if we go back to that average balance, part of the reason why it's not such a big jump, like we'd seen 20s to 30s, 40s, 50s.
Big jumps, yeah.
We saw movement.
Yep.
This is really increased, but not quite as much as you'd expect, especially considering coming out of your prime earning years. Mm-hmm. Part of that is because for a portion of that time frame, people are withdrawing from that portfolio. Mm-hmm. So, the average balance is going to actually be lower because, if the average person retires at 61, then, for 8 of those 9 remaining years, you're taking money out.
And a couple other factors that go into that is that you're probably not invested as aggressively, so you're probably not getting as much growth, and you're not contributing. Like you had just mentioned.
A good portion
of that. A good portion of that. So there's a couple things going that kind of make that number a little convoluted, I think.
Yeah. So just keep that in mind. But that 10% is, again, that benchmark. It's not the right number for everyone. Depends on what your goals are. But it's a good reference point as you work your way up towards those ages.
So Josh, before we go any further,
yes,
I'd like to get us going on this Thursday episode with a dad joke of the week.
I'm ready.
And this is one that you and we battle about sometimes.
Okay, I'm ready.
Josh, if Apple made a car, what would it be missing?
Functionality.
That's a joke.
Oh,
good
sorry.
one. Good one, Josh.
No,
no, actually, it'd be missing
customization.
Windows.
Oh, Windows.
It'd be missing Windows.
I gotcha.
See what I said there?
Yeah, got it.
So anyway, speaking of that, Apple's working on reportedly a car that they're going to be partnering with potentially someone like Hyundai. Who knows on the production of it? I think it's going to be pretty cool. It's probably going to be pretty expensive.
It's going to be an iCar.
It's going to be iCar.
Name it? Is that,
yeah,
it's going to be
they have
like
to.
that.
They've actually really moved away from, other than you have iPhone, iPad, iMac,
iWatch.
But no, it's not. There's no iWatch. No. It's the Apple Watch.
Yeah,
Apple
what do you do when you watch
AirPods. Apple TV.
No, but that's iWatch.
iWatch.
Apple TV.
I see it.
You're
on a roll today, Josh.
I'm in a mood, I guess.
You're in a mood. All so let's take that mood and hone it in a little bit, because this is really where you spend a lot of your time and effort in real life.
Yeah.
People in their 60s, people getting into retirement, transitioning into retirement. So this is why it's good to have the expert here. I'm just here to be a funny guy.
So let's first put this out, disclaimer, right? Not everybody retires in their 60s.
Or at all.
Some are able to retire earlier.
Yeah.
Some retire later. So when we're talking about this is, again, the average. We're looking at, a lot of people, the majority of people are planning on retiring somewhere in their 60s. So that's kind of why we're focusing on this. Based on your plan, you may love your job and say, you know what, I'm going to keep working
till they make me leave.
Till I'm forced out of there. But that just keep that in mind. So some of this will just apply to you whenever these transitions are happening. But we're talking about it here in the 60s time frame because a lot of people, that's kind of their window.
Yeah. So let's start with the leading up to retirement, right? So let's start with, how do you prepare for taking that step?
Yep. So this, late 50s, early 60s. Preparing for retirement. You're kind of in that final stage. You can see the light at the end of the tunnel. You got to do a couple things, right? You got to get ready. And so the first thing you got to do is review all of your company benefits and what is available for you. So some companies offer continuation of either discounts or incentives for even their retirees. So if you leave your company and retire, they may still offer an insurance for you at a discount than you can find elsewhere.
It's actually ideal.
Yes. Oh, it'd be great if not all companies do, but those are the things. So be aware before you retire, which things are available, so you know which things you got to go out and get on your own.
Right.
But work through all those, look at all that's available. Also, make sure that you're taking advantage of everything while you're working. Because, again, you're in your prime earning years. If you have some extra cash flow, if they allow a health savings account, if they allow all the different things within your company, man, make sure you're taking advantage of all those and getting those in there while you're working. Because there's certain things that are only available to you while you have earned income. And some of those things you want to do before you retire.
Even additional savings if you can.
Oh, yeah.
So, you can only contribute to a Roth IRA if you have earned income. So, while you have it and you have the extra money laying around potentially, chuck it in there, tax-free growth, right? Same with your 401k. you can only have a company 401k plan if you're getting paid by the company. And if you don't need the money right now, you could pay less tax now also by putting that money into your 401k.
Yep. So the next one, and this is important, you may have budgeted your whole life, but what we suggest and what I think is a great idea is, one, track your spending so you get a good idea of what you're spending, but prepare a post-retirement budget and try it out. See what that looks like. Give it a trial run for a month or two just to see how that feels. You may be surprised where you thought, you know what, I'm only going to spend X amount. Then you think, you know what, it's actually a little more than that. Or, if I have that free time, these things are going to cost a little more. So try out that budget. Give it a little test run there for a couple months just to see what that's like. And then along with that, early in retirement, especially if you're leaving an employment, there is a transition period where you may not have access to some of your funds as it's being moved into the retirement phase. So let's say you work at a company that offers a pension. Depending on when you file and how that works, it may be a month delayed or two before you actually see that start hitting.
Right.
So prepare for that beginning period when withdrawals may not start yet. And so what you do, you boost up your emergency fund. Make sure you have extra cash. Cash is very, very important in the early parts of retirement.
Absolutely.
Because one, when you retire, depending on, again, your company and how it's structured, but you may have additional pay for, unearned vacation, sick days, all those things. You may get cash, but you also may be delayed in getting your other retirement contributions. So holding an emergency fund, building that up is huge. And so preparing for retirement, just thinking through what are those first couple months going to be like. That's huge to consider my cash flow.
Yeah. And you mentioned it, and we should probably elaborate a little bit more, but a lot of people, especially a lot of people in their 60s now, probably had a pension of some sort, and that is something that is a great thing for that generation. It's not so common now.
Right.
But you need to look at your options with that. These are things you do as you're preparing for retirement, not necessarily waiting until the end.
Right.
So a lot of people take the pension, leave it as a pension, and you get paychecks from that, essentially, is how it works forever.
Yep.
Or a lot of people take lump sums. Knowing what your policy, your plan on both of those options is very good, because those can have very different impacts on your overall total financial picture over time.
Taking a monthly payout from a pension plan is usually where they'll say, okay, you could choose your survivor benefits. Well, so if you have a spouse, you can get more money right now if you say something has to be, nothing else happens. So 0% survivorship, meaning all the money goes to me. I get a higher monthly payout, but there's no obligation if something happens to the person who earned it, who worked. You can have a 50% survivorship. So I get paid a certain amount. If something happens to me, half of that amount then goes to my spouse for the rest of their life. Or you can have 100%, where if something happens to me, the same amount continues on for my spouse.
And your payout goes down.
The more you choose the survivor, the less you're going to get monthly, because that helps cover their liabilities. Then there's the lump sum, where you just say, okay, if I use some sort of table factor of how long the life expectancy for an average person to be, they'll give me an upfront lump sum, and they have no more obligation.
Correct.
Yeah, it's an analysis to say what makes the most sense for my lifestyle, for my needs, what other assets do I have. And so it's not one straight answer for everybody.
Yep.
The other factor is there an adjustment to that payout amount? Am I going to get the same amount every month? Because if I get $100 a month now, in 30 years, $100 is not going to buy the exact same thing.
Absolutely.
And so factor all that in, make that decision. But you're right. With pensions, there's those decisions. With 401ks, and we're going to talk about that as you transition, what you need to do with retirement accounts. There's a lot of decisions there. But one other thing before we get there, well, actually two things, but they kind of go hand in hand. Pay any large expenses that you have while you have an income.
Oh, yeah.
So if your car's getting old and you know you're going to be replacing it,
probably do that while you have a job.
To do it while you have income. Start budgeting and planning for that. And then on the other side, use some of that income. Try to get debt free. Try to pay down that debt so that as you transition to that retirement, you don't have those obligations.
And we would say, obviously, first and foremost, debt free as it relates to any high interest debt.
Yep.
Credit cards, obviously, we don't want to be carrying those into retirement. We don't want to really ever be carrying those if you can. But car loans, things like that. But in a perfect world, even get to the point where you don't have a mortgage, right? That is ideal, because then that's one expense that you don't have to worry about covering with however you're pulling together all of your different buckets of retirement income. You don't have to cover it anymore. And then you can just focus on your needs month to month, which is, insurance and taxes and food and healthcare and yada, yada, yada. So Yeah, good points there.
Yep. So that transition period, you turn in your 2 weeks notice or whatever it is at your company, and you're going to make that transition. There's things you need to think about. There's tax considerations. So if I saved at my company retirement plan, let's say it's a 401k, 403b, kind of the normal thing you see at most retirement plans, I have options. I can leave it there. I can move it to a rollover IRA. I can move it into a Roth IRA if it's not already Roth 401k money. I can take it in cash. There's a lot of things, and you got to understand what those long-term tax consequences will be for each of those decisions.
Right.
Again, everybody's situation is different, but understand what those different things are. Leaving it at your 401k keeps that tax deferred status, but there's certain limitations there. Moving to a rollover IRA still keeps a tax deferred status, but there's ramifications for that. There's maybe additional costs involved. So you just understand what those are, make the best decision for you. But consider taxes, because there's a lot going on. Do I retire on 12/31?
Yeah.
Or do I retire on 1/1?
Well,
that makes a big difference.
And another thing is when you're looking at setting that end date, right? Something to consider is a lot of people have, depending on where you work, you could have some time off accrued, and you may have earned that all the way up front, and you can cash it in or take it out, or you can only use what you've accrued throughout the year. Different companies have different policies, but understand the policy for one, but know that if you do cash it out, it's taxable income as well, and whenever that occurs, whether that be in the new year or the current year, that's going to be additional taxable income to consider.
Yeah, and so there's a lot going on there. You know, sometimes you may even be able to have a retirement date, but then based on their pay, carries over into the next year. Who knows? You know, it just keep in mind, you got to be aware of those things.
Yeah.
As you transition, though, one of the things I strongly recommend, take some time to decompress. Chances are you've been working for 40 years. If you're retiring in your 60s, chances are you've been working for 40 years. Take some time. Figure out what you want to do. What's the next phase of your life going to be like? You don't have to have all the answers. In fact, I've gone through some training on this, and the average person retires 3 times. Not meaning that they know, have to go back to work, but they change what retirement is 3 times as they figure out what makes the most sense for me, what makes me the happiest.
Yeah.
And I always say retirement is really just having enough money to go to sleep at night and enough purpose to want to get up in the morning. Those are the 2 things that make retirement successful.
Right.
And so take some time and figure that out. You don't have to have all the answers right away. And you may try something and be like, this is not as much fun as I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
Go do something else. That's the cool part of this. You're financially free to make those decisions at this point.
Yeah, that's just it. The flexibility that you've earned. So you've worked all of these years, and maybe you want something less pressure. You want to work part-time doing something, whatever that may be. You just want to do something different that has no pressure to get up at the middle of the night or whatever to go kill it at work or whatever. So that is something that is maybe, it's just a mind release where you're just like, I can relax. I can enjoy it. I don't have this high-pressure job anymore. I'm still doing a little something because I like it, or it's nice to have a couple extra bucks or whatever, but it's not the same.
Yep. And by the way, 2/3 of people surveyed planned on working in retirement.
Yeah.
So working could be part of retirement, and that's not a bad thing. So just understand there will be adjustments as you make this transition. You've spent, again, a good chunk of your life in one routine that you're going to disrupt. It's going to disrupt you. If you have a spouse, it's going to disrupt your relationship with them. If there's kids still around, it's going to disrupt that. That's fine. Just make sure everybody's on the same page, communicate, and understand that there'll be a trial and error. We've not gone through this before. We're going to have to figure it out.
For sure. So, Josh, kind of break it down with some just real high level, good things you need to have in your head as you're in your 60s or getting towards your 60s to retire. Some key ages, some key thoughts that you just need to keep at the top of your mind.
Here are just some important things just have in your mind. So in between 60 and 69, there are a couple of things that happen. So the first one
roughly
is,
9 years.
Yes. 10 if you have the 0. And
okay.
So either way. So 65. Age 65 is when Medicare is available. So if you've worked and have enough earned credits in Social Security, you are eligible for Medicare. Medicare is the government insurance program for elderly people. There's certain parts that are free, certain parts that you pay for, and then there's supplemental to that. A lot of decisions in there as well. But it's available at 65. So keep that in mind. You can't get it before. There's other things you can get before, but Medicare for just retirees starts at 65.
And that's why it's one of the key things we talked about earlier is knowing your options with your current employer plan, if there are any, just understanding them. Because if you don't have them, you're going to have to find an in-between.
Yes. Yep. So another age, 62. So that's the starting or earliest age you can claim retirement Social Security benefits. Now, there's disability Social Security benefits that you could get before if you're disabled, not talking about that. But for retirement benefits, 62 starts it. Now it's a reduced rate. So at 62, you can start getting a monthly amount, but it's going to be reduced. 67 is your full retirement age. And now that is for current people working.
Yeah.
Based on your age and your birthday, there's actually, you could be 66 in 10 months, but we're getting to the point now for most people that are not yet in their 60s, it's going to be 67 your full retirement age.
Yep.
And maybe even later, depending on future laws. But the reason why that matters, full retirement age in Social Security's language means that's your full benefit you've earned through everything you put in. It's not reduced. From every month on, you can get a higher amount. From 67 all the way up to 70, you can actually get increased benefits from Social Security. And so choosing from 62 to 70, there's a decision to be made on when do I want to start claiming Social Security. So just keep that in mind. But 62, 67, those are kind of the two in our time frame we're looking at. Another thing to keep in mind is if you are retiring, a Roth conversion may be a good strategy to employ. Roth conversion is just moving money from an IRA bucket of pre-tax into a Roth IRA of post-tax. And so when you move that money, you pay tax on that transfer. It's a distribution. And so it's moved from a pre-tax to post-tax, so it's tax. So if you move $10,000 on your tax return, you'll show $10,000 of income that need to be taxed on that move. The reason why that may be worth considering is once you retire, your income is going to go down.
Therefore, your tax bracket drops.
So therefore, you're in a lower tax bracket. The reason most people do that, well, there's a couple, but the main reason is if I can move money and pay tax at my designated rate when my required distributions start, which we'll talk about that in our 70-plus episode, required distributions may be more than I want, and I may be forced to pay a higher tax on those.
Right.
So I can control my tax brackets by choosing when and how much I convert or move over to a Roth.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's something to consider. Also, the ideal age to start shopping for long-term care is in your early 60s because that's when you'll get a good price and also you're kind of in that window of starting to be eligible for those type of things. So long-term care can be expensive. Really, again, determines on your plan, where you're at, if it's the right thing for you. But now is a good time to start thinking about it if you're in your early 60s.
Yep.
A couple other things to do, especially as you're transitioning, review your estate documents. All right. So let's say you're going to retire and move down to Florida where it's all warm, like a lot of retirees do. Okay. Who is my power of attorney? Who is my healthcare power of attorney? Are they still located in the same state as me?
Right.
Or is it my kid who's still up north? So review your estate documents. Do they still make sense for where my current life situation is? Review your within the estate, my will or trust. Now that I have assets that have probably moved around, maybe I rolled out some 401k money, maybe I have a pension that started. Do all my documents match what I'm currently doing, what my will is? Do I have new family members? If you're in your 60s, chances are if you had kids, they're grown-ups or getting to that phase in life that maybe they're going to be getting married and having grandkids for you. So check your estate documents, make sure they work out. And then the big one, and we could talk about this, is asset allocation.
Right.
You mentioned it earlier. Maybe you're not quite as aggressive as you were in your 20s and 30s when you had a lot of time frame to let it go. But there's two sides to this, and we're going to talk about it together. The first one that I'm going to spend some time on is being prepared to protect against what I call bad timing, which is choosing to retire right before the market drops, which, again, with foresight, everybody knows when the market's going to drop, so you should never have to worry about it.
Just time your retirement appropriately.
But statistically speaking, if you look at retirement testing, having bad market returns early in retirement, the first handful of years you retire, is bad on your portfolio.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, it's more impactful than if you have those same bad returns in the middle or the end of your retirement plan.
Right.
So choosing an asset allocation that can help protect against that is a very, very important thing. We talk about it, we refer to as a bear market fund, as in some sort of very conservative investment that you can turn to if the market does drop early on in retirement. That way you don't have to draw that portfolio that's down in value when you need the money to live off.
That's the key. Pulling from things that are not down.
Yes.
So if you are pulling from stocks when stocks are way down, we've seen this recently, but if you had to pull from stocks last spring when you were down 30%, people did it. People had to do it. But that gives those stocks that you're selling not the opportunity to have the great rally that we've had up to today, and then you were just selling when you're down. Where if you're having something like you said, something super conservative, it could be cash, it could be bonds, it could be whatever, super conservative to pull from when those things happen, because they do. We know they happen, but we also know they recover.
Yes, historically, the markets
they've always recovered. So having that on the side is key, especially during those first handful of years, because as you get older, those downturns are less important for the long-term plan.
Right.
But early on, they can really have a big impact.
Yep. Now, the reverse of that is there's an old adage that said, hey, do you want to know how much you should be invested in the stock market? Take 100 minus your age, and that's how much should be in the stock market. That was an old adage that people used to use. Yeah. And so let's say you're 65 years old. You should have 35% of your portfolio in stocks. Right. And the rest would be in fixed income cash.
I can see why this was old, because interest rates used to be much higher.
So that was an old adage. Yeah. Now, again, I bring it up to point out, so as you get older, you have less in the stock market. Now, the problem with that is people are living longer.
Yep.
And so this is not a very good representation anymore of a good asset allocation. While you do want to protect for those early years, you also want to make sure you're invested in a way that makes sure you're growing and keeping up with inflation and allowing your money to last for hopefully beyond your lifetime, which is the goal. So it's kind of a double-edged sword where I don't want to be too aggressive with all my money where I could miss out on protecting my assets if it goes down, but I also don't want to be too conservative where, oh no, I missed out on growth and now I'm struggling later on in my 80s and 90s or whatever. And so it's kind of a balanced allocation. That's why a good financial advisor can help you plan for that and determine how much needs to be in which bucket.
The buckets are the key there, right? You can have buckets that have different uses.
Yep.
And it's great. It is okay, and that's what it's for, to take money out of your stocks when it's doing well.
Yeah.
That's what it's for.
Yeah, so just high level, a spend down policy in retirement should be, I'm drawing first from stocks if they're up.
Yep.
Second, I'll draw from fixed income if it's up. Third, I'll draw from cash. That's kind of the level. Then, if I run out of all of those, I'll start drawing from my fixed income if it's down, and then finally my stocks if they're down.
Yeah.
So that's the order because of volatility. So if things are up, the thing that are most volatile, you're going to draw from stocks because they have the most volatile but also the most likely to be up. Bonds next, as long as they're positive. Now, if both of those are negative, you draw out of your cash until that's gone. And then once your cash is gone, fixed income, because they're probably less down.
Right. It does. It goes down less than stocks. Yes.
So anyway, that's a good order of withdrawal. But you're right in that you need to give yourself permission to spend in retirement.
That's what you work so hard for.
People can be very frugal and have a hard time switching from saving to spending mode.
Right.
And we do. I mean, I remember sitting across from clients and they're still in savings mode, and it's hard to save when you have no income. And so they get very stressed about making expenditures that they planned 40 years to do. And you have to, in a sense, give yourself permission to enjoy that retirement.
You can buy a car.
It's okay.
It's okay. Or whatever. Yeah.
Yep. So having a good plan matters, and that's the key. So as you wrap up the 60 to 69 age frame, planning is key. Having a plan heading into there, sticking to it and implementing it through there, and being flexible to adjust it. Let's say you were thinking of retiring last year, market's down 34. Maybe I push it out a little bit.
Waiting a year would have worked out quite well.
So being a little flexible with your plan is always important.
Absolutely. So that, everyone, is your 60s. We're talking a really important period for a lot of people. Not everyone, but for a lot of people. Next week, we are going to be wrapping up this series by talking about what to do in your 70s and beyond.
Yep.
So 70s really through the end of life, right?
Through 300.
Because that's where we're headed, right? Yes. Medical advances are wonderful. So stay tuned. Next week, we're going to be talking about that. But as always, check out our free gift to you. It's a brief list of 8 principles of timeless investing. They will help you with the things we've talked about today. They're overarching investment themes meant to keep you on track to meet your long-term goals, which these long-term goals are exactly what we're talking about as you're approaching retirement. Josh, how can people help us grow this podcast?
Yep. Make sure you subscribe. That way every Thursday you get our episodes. And then if you like to, please leave a review on Apple Podcast. That's always great for us. And if you have any thoughts, questions, if you're in your 60s and are thinking through some problems, shoot us an email at hello@theinvesteddads.com. We'd love to talk with you. And then finally, you know what? Still time.
Join
us in the Invested Dads podcast, second annual. Oh man, it's such a long.
It's like a stock draft, right?
It's the 2021 Invested Dads second annual stock draft.
That's right.
Second half of the year, second annual stock draft. Oh man, it's got to be shorter than it. Either way, sign up. It's on Investopedia.
You can do it all the way through the end of the year.
Yeah, you can sign up at any point in time. Maybe I know right now I'm down, so you can beat me just by joining in. It's free. Check it out. Time. It's not real money, so it's just a fun time.
We've got how to do that on all of our social media and on our website. So check it out. All right. Well, until next Thursday, have a great week.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you for listening to the Invested Dads podcast. This episode has ended, but your journey towards a better financial future doesn't have to. Head over to theinvesteddads.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in today's show. If you enjoyed this episode and we had a positive impact on your life, leave us a review, click subscribe, and don't miss the next episode. Josh Robb and Austin Wilson work for Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. All opinions expressed by Josh, Austin, or any podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Hicks & Zerker Capital Management may maintain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast. There is no guarantee that the statements, opinions, or forecasts provided herein will prove to be correct. Past performance may not be indicative of future results. Indices are not available for direct investment. Any investor who attempts to mimic the performance of an index would incur fees and expenses which would reduce returns. Securities investing involves risk, including the potential for loss of principal. There is no assurance that any investment plan or strategy will be successful.